Okay. Hello, everybody. I am Shelby Midbow, and Plan A and Plan B for recording this PowerPoint for you did not work, so I am moving on to Plan C, and I hope that it does work for you. Um, I have been asked by Amanda to speak to you about speech therapy in the schools, and I am more than happy to do that because I really love my job, and I think it is one of the most important jobs in speech therapy. So I'm happy to share what I know with you. Um, Before I even start, I would like to let you know that I know that not all of you need information on speech therapy in the schools. For some of you, looking at this PowerPoint quickly and reading what I have written will be sufficient for you. For those of you who are going to work in schools, though, I know that the video is long and I might break it up into parts, but I encourage you to watch all of it because I'm going to cover some things about contracts and union and other things that you need to know as far as just generally working in the schools that you may or may not have gotten as part of your practicum there. During my practicum, it was a lot of procedures and talking about what to do in this situation and that situation and designing therapy. But there was not a lot of this is what it means to work in a school. And when someone approaches you about this or that, what are you actually going to say? And so I'm trying to incorporate some of that into this recording for you. So it is very long. Um, but like I said, if you're a person who is already going to be working in a medical setting, please don't feel like you need to watch the entire thing. However, do know that I feel like it's really good information, obviously, since I put it together. I work at Target Range School. It is a preschool through eighth grade school, um, which makes scheduling kind of traumatic, actually, for lack of a better word, and it's nonstop. Um, so, but there are other ways to work in schools, and so I also asked two people from my cohort, Molly Forrest and then Margaret Gaynor, um, to contribute on this PowerPoint with me. And then there's another model that my friend McKenna Cool, sorry, she says Kale, is also um, working in a different model in the schools. And so she was my practicum student twice. I had her for BSEP, and she also came and worked with me at Target Range. And so I asked her if she would also just give us some more information about what she's doing in Idaho. And so um, that's the information contained here. So what does a school SLP do? We provide speech therapy services for um, students aged 3 through 21. And so kids can be referred to us from Part C. And you'll actually see that in the referral and the evaluation process. They ask those questions if they were referred from Part C. Most of the referrals that we get, however, are just parents and teachers wondering if this kid should have speech, and that we serve under Part B through IDEA, which, as you should know, is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. There's many iterations of this act, but all of them require that public schools provide free services for students aged 3 through 21. Currently, there's a bill in the Montana legislature to uh, create state funding for students aged 19 and 20 up to their 21st birthday because currently Montana is one of two states that does not provide that funding, even though it's mandated by IDEA. And so, if a school wants to provide services for someone who is past the age of 18 when they will presumably have graduated, that is all on the district to fund. So, we'll see if that passes. Anyways, other things that a school speech therapist does is screenings, child find, and evaluations. So we're going to determine eligibility. The guidelines for speech therapy in schools are different than private. For example, I've had parents come up to me and say, my kid kind of has a weird S thing going on. And I say, oh, how old is your kid? And they'll say 3. And as a school speech therapist, I will laugh that that's an actual concern. And I say, well, do they have other sound errors? And they're like, no, it's just a little lispy when they make their S. And I was like, okay, well, that would never qualify in a school. But in private practice, you could certainly see that child and help them make their individual sound. understand I'm not saying that a child with many bad phonological processes wouldn't be eligible, but just one sound is never going to qualify in a school. Um, so we just have a lot of different eligibility guidelines than you do in a private school. And so sometimes doctors will write prescriptions for speech therapy in school, and they can't actually do that because they have to be found eligible by the state standards. So that's an interesting thing. So in a school, speech therapists can be case managers or related service providers, which means if a student is speech only, then we are in charge of everything for that child, from the meetings to the talking to the teachers and providing accommodations and making sure they're happening. Or we can be a related service provider. And so that's a child who's going to qualify under a different category, such as other health impairment or developmental disability. They could be LD and have a learning disability in, math or reading. But then that's going to be the special ed teacher who's going to be the case manager for that particular student. And we are just going to be a related service provider, which means that we are not in charge of scheduling that student's meetings. And although we still will collaborate and talk to teachers, we're not in charge if there becomes a problem. So, of course, as in any setting, we collaborate with teachers. We work on functional things for the student. Um, we really focus on things that help them function in school. We are not focusing on things that will help them function at home, like you might in private speech therapy. We're really school related function. Um, we can do push in or pull out services or a combination of both. And you'll see in the case studies that I have that people comment, Molly and I both comment on how much we push in and pull out. We also co-teach with other specialists and we do consultation. And I know from having been through the same program that you're in that you have already studied all of those models, so I will not elaborate. Um, Another thing that we do is create the schedule, and then as kids enter and exit speech therapy, we have to reschedule all the time, literally all the time, and it takes a lot of work to do that. We also do response to intervention. The School of Ed offers an entire class on response to intervention. This is a general education initiative, and there are 3 tiers to that. Speech therapy is actually outside of response to intervention. However, we could provide materials to teachers to work on things like language um, in their classrooms so that if kids need more support, we could give them specific materials to help them with whatever their actual difficulties are. Um, we could do phonological awareness response to intervention if a kid is not in title, but probably they would be in title if they needed that. And title, I should not assume that you know what that is. That is, again, another federally funded program that specifically helps with reading and math. People who are low but not low enough to receive special education. Um, Anyways, in my school, I'm allowed to grab kids who are past um, a year past where they need to have sounds in according to the Sanders chart. So I can grab them and just try and fix it if they just have one sound error. Anything over that, we need to probably qualify them for an IEP, which is an individualized education program. But I can grab kids and work with them for a period of 6 to 8 weeks intervention and see if I can fix their R or their S or whatever sound it is that they are still having problems with. And if that is successful in 6 to 8 weeks, my school actually lets me have 2 cycles before I have to qualify someone for an IEP. But um, it's kind of doing the therapy without the paperwork, especially if it's a kid that has only one sound. So that's kind of what RTI looks like for me, but there are other models. Um, Student supervision duties at some schools, so this is going out to recess duty or hall duty or anything like that. Not all speech therapists have to do that. It depends on the model, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then, of course, there's paperwork to do and meetings to run. Um, and that's different in each school district. Um, and mostly what I mean by that is the time of day that the meetings occur. If you are governed by a collective bargaining agreement through your union that says that your hours are from, like for me, for example, at 7:45 to 3:45. If we work outside of those duty days, we try to avoid that if at all possible. Of course, all teachers work a little bit extra, um, but we try to have our meetings during teacher duty days. Um, Other contracts say that meetings will be outside of duty days, but they will pay you extra for that, and I'll show you an example of that. And so, um, you could, if you are the case manager, you'll have to run the meetings. If you are a related service provider, you're just a participant in the meeting. And so, there's all sorts of different models that hopefully, if you've done a school practicum, you know what I'm talking about as far as those things go. So there's a lot of paperwork, and then the question becomes, how do you know what you're doing? So in Montana, this is governed by the Office of Public Instruction, and so there's trainings that you can go to. If you go to the OPI website, you will find trainings, and so you need to ask the whatever district you're working for if you could please attend one of those trainings, and they will generally send you to that, to whatever the closest one is. Um, and then the OPI Special Education Guidelines is a document that's published on the OPI website. You should probably print this out and have it in a binder in your office. It's not very easy to get through, even when you're able to flip through it. And so scrolling through it online is also really tricky. Hopefully, they will come up with a more user friendly way to help us with the knowledge that we need. It's full of all sorts of examples and questions and answers about the special education process, but it's still difficult to locate things that you need quickly. So it's good to have it printed out, in my opinion. But I'm old and like things in my hand, so you guys might not be in that situation. Um, I am part of a group of women, and we're actually meeting this Friday. And we are working on finalizing something that's called the Montana Public Schools Guidelines for the Provision of Speech Language Pathology Services under IDEA. And so this is a guide that is specific to the practice of speech language pathology. It'll be on the OPI website so that parents can see the process for um, qualification, since it is different than private. It will show you the method that you need to go through, or the exact steps to go through to get qualified for speech. And then after that, um, what you can expect as far as annual reviews of the IEP, etc. So the other reason that we created this is because there are a lot of administrators, even special education administrators, who are not super sure about what speech therapy is, what it should look like, and what we do, how people qualify, etc. And so the OTs and PTs in the state have had a guide like this for many years, and they were redoing ours. And an OT in Billings talked to a speech therapist in Billings and said, "Are you guys redoing yours?" And she said, "We don't even have one." So we're creating one. And so I'm excited to be um, in the first version of that. And yeah, it should be coming out hopefully by fall of 2019. So you also are going to want to have a practicum with a good supervisor who's going to show you how to do the paperwork and explain the system. That's a really good way to learn. Um, Otherwise, during your CFY supervision, make sure that you get help every step of the way, the first little bit of your CFY, to make sure that you're doing your paperwork correctly, because schools do get audited every fifth year. And so you will need to make sure that your PLAFs have enough data in them and that your timelines are correct for everything. Um, it's uncomfortable to get audited, even, I mean, I feel like Target Range runs a really tight ship as far as paperwork goes, and it's still uncomfortable, and they still find things, and it's fine because it's not a slap your wrist, it's a help you through the process um, situation. And so you want to have a good CF supervisor, whether they're on site or not, that can help you make sure that you're doing everything correctly. And then For Medicaid billing, your supervisor is responsible for teaching you how their district does it. See, I'm going to escape for a minute and see if I can go show you if I still even have it open. Here's my schedule, and I was talking about, oh boy, you guys, so much craziness. Okay, here's my schedule, and it's not even my current schedule because it keeps changing. I have a new kid here and a new thing tucked in. Oh, right here. We just added something right here today. Anyways, my schedule is tight, and it changes every single year. You know, last year I had to eat lunch at about 10:30 every day, which was weird. And this year I don't get lunch until 12:30 or 1:30 every day, depending on what the situation is. Um, so as you can see, this is a tiring and exhausting schedule to go through every day, and there's everybody is back to back to back. And so when new people are added, you have to find places that they can fit in with other kids who are already on your schedule, or you have to move things around. And being in a preschool through 8th grade, it's really tricky for me to do that. So I just wanted to show you this is what my current Tetris situation is for this year. And I have added one more person right here, like I said, one more person right here, and I still have, I believe, 4 open evaluations and 1 exit evaluation, but that's only going to lose me this kiddo, and this kiddo is still going to be there, so that spot's still going to be full, and etc. It's just it's tricky. Okay, so that's what my schedule looks like, and then I wanted to show you. Let's see, I don't know where I put it. Sorry. I think I only have a stop, or there's my letter to Amanda saying help. I don't know. I wanted to show you the SLP resource guide, so I'll see if I can find it for you later. We'll carry on. This is long enough without me messing around. Okay, carrying on. I do this every time. Okay, so how do you get to work in a school? So as you can see, there's a number of different models. I am hired by a district directly. Some people work through a co-op. Some people are contracted by a district directly, and some people are employed by a private company. And they can either work in schools in person or via telepractice. And so I've got some information on all those models. So I'm hired directly by the school. Um, I report to a lead speech therapist or a special ed administrator. In my case, it's a special ed administrator, and it's going to be different. So even though this is going to have commonalities across the board for people hired directly by the school, there's still differences depending on your school size and structure. Um, so my contract is directly with the school per my certified bargaining agreement. In Montana, most speech therapists are hired on the school CBA. So I'm going to talk to you about that here in a second. Some speech therapists have their own contract, which is separate from the teachers. And they also have a different bargaining unit than the teachers due to our different job demands that we have. Like my schedule, if you remember what you just saw, has very few breaks in it, and the breaks are usually full of doing evaluations or observations or paperwork or prep. God forbid we actually get to prep for a client during the school day. While people on the same pay scale as me, the middle school teachers, for example, have 2 45-minute preps a day. And so in their blocks, 45 continuous minutes where they get to work on things. So obviously for us, that would be filled by evaluations probably, or screenings or something, but just even the option to have a moment to prep would be super. And so a lot of groups make their own union to go bargain because what we do looks different than what teachers do. Just the nature of the beast. So our contract is per steps and lanes with a salary increase for cost of living, continuing education. So I'm going to walk you through that in just a second. And then all of our employee rights are outlined in the CBA. If you're not a full-time speech therapist at a school, you may not be eligible to work under the terms of the CBA, and but that'll also be outlined in the CBA. Finally, some letters you don't understand, but don't worry, I'm going to show you. You can be a member in the union depending on the terms of your CBA, and then working in a school is great because you also have um, the opportunity to just be really close to staff members because you're there all the time. Um, I shouldn't say that you're there all the time because there are a number of people who are hired directly by a school district who serve, 3 or 4 different schools during their work week, and so they will feel almost more itinerant than permanent. And so that's just U of M email never stops, right? Okay, Netflix too. Okay. Um, anyway, I want to come out again and show you now what I'm talking about. So this is our CBA for target range, and these are all public, so it's not like I'm going to get in trouble for showing you this. Um, here's all the information that's included. So this is really the terms of our contract, and I think that private and medical don't have, unless they're in a union, a lot of times they won't have things this clearly delineated. And these are always changing. We negotiate every 2 years. So here's all of our rights. Professional dues. So you have to pay to be in unions, and that's a question that people ask. And the pay is based on how much money you make. And so if you're a starting teacher, you're not going to pay as much as someone who's been around for many years. So it's kind of a sliding scale, if you will. There's payroll deductions, teacher rights, that shows what we're allowed to do. It's different for every district, but it's outlined in this guide. Grievance is if we have a gripe against the administration, what that process is. Teacher evaluation, so if you work in a school, you're going to get evaluated, and those are the outlines and the dates that the administration have to follow. Um, then it also talks about your contract. Um, what happens if you have to get laid off. These are all the kind of leaves that we have available to us working in the school. And so we do get to have sick days and bereavement days. Um, I just want to say, as an aside, I am a member of many Facebook groups that are for speech therapy. And a lot of people, it varies how much leave you get and what your requirements for making up sessions are for leave. For me, my administrator is like, I don't know how you would ever make up a session because you have more sessions. And so she's very understanding that if I don't see kids when I'm scheduled to see them, they're just not getting seen that week, unless there's some way I can work a miracle, which sometimes happens. Um, so this talks about insurance. You should get that as part of your full-time package. Salary schedule is what we're going to go look at, and then the matrix is at the end. And so this clearly shows who's eligible. And so for this one, for example, for a speech therapist, you have to be at least 0.75. So someone who was zero point 0.5 or only worked part-time would be on a separate contract than the teacher. And so they would just be offered their own contract, and we'll talk about that. They would not be on this matrix. So we're going to go all the way to the end now, and I wanted to show you what this means. Um, here's where the salary schedule is described and the rules for moving across it. And so in schools, people who are on your negotiating team for your union go in and negotiate how much of a raise you're going to get. For my school, we bargain for every 2 years. And I know that people at the university have similar things. And there's a pay increase for all the university people in this year's legislature. So yay, yay for them. Hardworking people, as you know. So when you get hired, you're going to be on step 0. And then they're going to go to your level of education. So as a person who's paying student loans right now, you should be absolutely horrified looking at this because you're thinking, how can I ever pay back the loans when I'm starting at this low of a pay? And this is, I mean, all I can say is welcome to Montana. It's the cost for living here. So what happened though when the first year that I was hired, I was hired as a contract employee, and they wanted me to work 28 hours a week. And that seemed reasonable. I called my practicum supervisor because she would know more than me. And I said, "Is that reasonable for the caseload?" And she thought, yeah, it was definitely reasonable, even with evaluations. And so I accepted and I worked as a contract employee. So I was not on this matrix. The next year, I had already increased the caseload enough that I needed to be full time. And so I went to the administrator. I wrote him a 3 page letter talking about direct and indirect services for speech therapy and explaining why I needed to be a full time employee. And he thought it was funny that I needed to argue my case. And I was like, well, I'm new here. And I thought I did. So here I am. As a contract employee with the schools, I was not offered insurance or anything. And so while I was making about this much my first year out of grad school, and remember also when you look at these numbers in horror, this is for 9 months of work, 9.5 about. So you still have the opportunity to supplement your income. Like I work in the nursing homes in the summer to supplement this because obviously in the early years, this is not almost still not a living wage, but that's the beauty of public schools. Um, So, anyways, I went and said, "Hey, I want to be on the matrix." And what happened then is I get this amount, but my school also contributes $12,000 a year towards my health insurance. And I get retirement benefits about, I mean, almost three or $4,000 a year. So that's an automatic $16,000 that the school's paying to have me on the payroll in addition to this, which is my salary. And so schools a lot of time have good benefits that other jobs don't have. And so that also needs to be considered when you're thinking about how crappy these numbers are. Excuse my professional language there. Um, you do get really good benefits that a lot of other employers do not offer. Medical places probably will offer that as well. And so you'll probably get better pay and um, also get benefits, possibly retirement. Um, you might not have as much availability to take time off because there's no one to replace you if you don't have good PRN staff. Um, and you also just don't get a couple months off potentially in the summer. So it just depends on what your life is. So when we get a degree, it's a master's degree and for speech therapy. And so we would start here at 38,221. When I went on the matrix, I argued that I should start at master's plus 15 because, as you know, a speech therapy degree has 52 credits, and that's if you didn't do leveling and a couple extra classes here and there. So um, I went to the website for educational leadership and for getting my master's in reading and just looked, and ours is still 15 credits above even what our principal would have to do to be a principal. So I argued to be a master's plus 15, and they didn't have any problem with that. So this column is the number of years that you've worked, and this over here is your level of education. So you control a little bit of how much you get paid when you work in a school. So when you consider that for 3 credits, it's about $1,000. I looked at this and I said, well, I'm not going to start taking credits again until I've been a teacher or a school employee for about 5 years because it doesn't really start adding up. You know, here I spend $1,000 to make $1,000. That's not really good math. But here I spend $1,000 and I'm gonna make, because you're gonna move over a year and up a year. And so then this is a $4,000 increase between 48 and 52, for example. But then also you have to consider that that's not the same year, so it's actually more. Um, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So this is the 1718 matrix. So let's just say in 1718, for example, let's say that I was step 5 and master's plus 15. So then I decide I'm going to take classes. And I take, these are quarter credits. And so 10 semester credits would get me the move over. And so before I was at step 5, and then my lane was master's plus 15, but every year we also get a cost of living increase. And so the next year I would be on step 6, but now I am master's 30. So I just went from 48,000 to 53. So that's a nice little jump. Um, and then if you take another bunch of credits the next year, then you'd move up another $4,000. But again, you paid for your credits, and it's also you're going to also get a cost of living increase. So it'd probably be more than this $3,500 jump that it looks like. So you control your own destiny. This is a built-in cost of living increase in this column here by year. It does top out, and so negotiating this year, we're going to ask for every additional 3 or 5 years for another $2,500 to be lumped on there. So anyhow, that is the contract. A lot of contracts, you'll notice not in our contract. There's usually an asterisk down here that says anybody with their Cs gets an additional $2,000 a year to help pay for costs of licensing. Teachers, just so you know, people on the same pay scale here only have to renew their license every 6 years, and it costs them approximately $60 to do so. In Montana, we get to renew our license annually, currently to the tune of $110. One year it was 250. Thank goodness for Masha. We said that's not okay. Um, so anyway, it's tricky. It's tricky to be on the same pay scale. However, I do need to say that people don't ever know whether they should join the union or not. And so before I continue on, I would like to say my personal opinion is I would not want to work in a school without union protection. Um, the law changed 2 summers ago that people do not have to be a member of the union. It used to be that even if you weren't going to be a member of a union, you still had to pay a fee because the people in the union argued for your contract. And so all of the numbers that you see on that matrix, all of the rules in the bargaining agreement are because people sat down with administration and school board members and said, this is what we want for our working conditions. And so there used to be an administrative fee that people used to have to pay to enjoy the work situation that had been bargained for them by members of the union. And then there's a different amount that you pay to be a member of the union. Now there's legislation, federal legislation, Janus, that said that people can, now unions are opt in instead of opt out. And so if you want to be a member of a union, you're either all or nothing. There's no administrative level, you just pay and you're in the union. So even if you're not in the union, you still enjoy the contract that has been negotiated for you. However, you do not enjoy the protections of if something happens to you in the school year and you want representation when you have to go talk to your administrator about your version of the story, and then they say what they heard. That is something that the union affords you is representation at the school level, and then there's state level union representation, and even higher if you need it. And so I know speech therapists in other settings have liability insurance. Um, and you would never work in a different setting without liability insurance. If you work in a school and you're under the school's contract, you do not have to pay for liability insurance on your own, although many people still do, just as backup. And it's completely affordable through ASHA, as an aside. But the union membership is, I just think it's really important. I'm actually the president of my union this year, and we're negotiating, and I'm going to bat for special education because people who are not in special education don't know what that situation is. Okay, going back to school, but this is the important stuff. This is the stuff you don't learn maybe in your practicum. So, I also just wanted to show you Great Falls Public Schools. They have medically related professionals handbook, and so this is their guide bargaining contract. So they took their OT, PT, speech therapy, special education, school psych, and they said, hey, we are medical professionals. Actually, I don't know if special ed teachers are in this. I know OTPT, speech therapy for sure. So they said our job doesn't look like the rest of the teachers, and so this looks like the other thing I just showed you. And they said we need to have different representation and different pay schedules based on our level of education and actually what we do. We're not going to get the same kind of breaks that other people are, and so we need to be paid at a higher level. The caseloads in Great Falls, I believe, are pretty high, um, but they've got more pay to show that. So, just as an example, here is their salary schedule, and so before I was showing you 5 and 6 years of service on mine, so let's just use those numbers. So that would just be the second step. And so here it's 4 to 6. So you're going to stay in the same pay scale for 2 years in a row, 3 years, I guess, 4, 5, 6. So every 3 years you would move up. So here's an associate's degree. Here's a medically related professionals degree, which is a master's degree. And so 58,000 is where they're going to start without the additional credits. Where for me, I was in the 40s with 15 credits. And so they're on a much higher pay scale than I am at target range on the teacher's pay scale. So then if they add more credits, they have the ability to earn more. And in the end, you can see that we're going to top out at about the same place before cost of living increases, which is about 71,000. And no, I guess on this teacher pay scale, it would be 76,000. So maybe a little more earning potential on the teacher pay scale, but I just wanted to show you that there's a difference. And so there just is. But all their rules are written out differently. So here's other compensation. Oh, this is something that we're adding this year in our negotiations, I hope. So we have to work in the summer sometimes. If there's kids who show regression without recoupment in uh, an expected amount of time, then we say that they should probably have speech in the summer too. So that's a separate contract because, as you can see, if you look through here, and ours is the same, your period of pay is 187 days in a school. And so if you have to work summer school, then you're going to need a separate contract. Here it is. So past the 187, you need a separate contract. And so this is the rules about how much they have to pay you. It is less than your regular schedule. So when you're serving students, not less than $25 an hour, and $20 an hour is paperwork time for this, which is really nice. Um, and here's other things that they'll pay for you. Here's professional involvement activities. I mean, this is amazing to have this medically related professionals because we just pay so much more to do what we do than teachers do. That it's a huge bummer that we're on the same pay scale in most districts, but that is how it is until you get involved and make a change. So I'm full of pitches, you guys. I'm full of them. Okay, so let's go back to this stuff. Will go a little bit more quickly now. So here is a case study on me. Don't record. Hired by the school district. My caseload was low when I started. It was all RTIC. By the end of this year, it'll be 57 or 58. Pre-K, I do my own schedule. I've said that. I don't have a speech aid. I have a paraprofessional that helps me with filing this year. That's a first. No more plan for staff next year to help me out with that caseload number. But I am going to a 3-in-1 model. I've talked to my administrator about that, and I just said, so the 3-in-1 model is also, my friend Molly got it approved in Hamilton. And so it's 3 weeks of direct service, 1 week of indirect service. And during the indirect service week, it's supposed to be indirect, it's still doing evaluations, screenings. Some people do their RTI only 1 week a month, and that's during the indirect service week. And so I'm really excited to try that out next year. And hopefully, I didn't want to do it this year because I was worried that grad students who were working with me might not get enough hours, but certainly with the number of evaluations that I have, you would get enough hours. So I'm going to try it out next year. I'm excited to see how it goes. For the first 4 years at my job, I had to set all my meetings when I was the case manager, and it was really daunting, like just an extra thing I didn't need, but I did have 20 kids fewer on my caseload, so I had more prep during the day. In the last 2 years, the district has had a secretary to do that for me. So I have to give her a form when meetings are coming up, and then she sets the meetings, and then the school psych fills out the paperwork and sends it to the parents because you do have to send written notice to parents and give them adequate notice. So there's all sorts of rules. Um, I usually get in a 30-minute lunch, but if I have meetings or evaluations, sometimes I miss lunch. And so I just pack all sorts of little things to eat all day long. And I'm sure if you've done a practicum in schools, you know, you see a similar situation. Um, Short bursts of prep between students, longer prep time is usually filled with evaluations, sometimes doing paperwork. And then I do all of my own IDEA paperwork, Medicaid billing, and I'm active in the union, as I mentioned. Molly's also hired directly by her district in Hamilton currently. Her caseload hovers around 70, and she is only preschool through first grade. And so, in addition to seeing her clients, she also spends a great deal of time evaluating to make people eligible and then evaluating to exit them because we can't exit unless we do another evaluation according to IDEA. And so this, she said this takes a considerable amount of time, and she does miss a lot of clients. Um, she did go in and talk to her administrator and get a speech aid. They weren't able to find one and hire one until March, and so that just happened. So the speech aid will work part time. There's two speech therapists. She has enough kids, kindergarten and first grade, preschool, K and one, sorry, that that's all that she does. And then the other speech therapist does second grade all the way through high school. And so the speech aid will help both speech therapists. She got a 4-in-1 schedule approved by her special ed director. I think she'll start that next year. She does not have any supervisory duties, so no lunchroom duty, no recess duty, no hallway duty. She's on an RTI and Title I committee, and she's been part of the MTSS committee, and so that is an MBI thing, which is the Montana Behavioral Institute, and I think that MTSS is what they call it in Hamilton. And she really liked being on that. She took a break from that this year, but she said she will go back next year because she felt like she has some original, not original to other people, but speech therapists, of course, we are trained in social communication, and so she has some things to offer to that committee that they might not think of otherwise. So she really liked to be on that and work through the behavior aspect. She goes to staff meetings once a week. I do the same. For her, it's not required. She likes to be informed. For me, it is required as part of my contract under the CBA. Molly, in Hamilton, they do have different requirements for their medically related professionals than the teachers do. She said she works 80% pull out, 20% push in, and then she does all of her paperwork and her Medicaid billing, which for both her and I is just less than half of our caseload. For her, she's billing, 35 would be half, and I think I'm at 23 this year, and my caseload will end up being 58. But I think that I really probably will have closer to 28 that would be eligible, but we just don't check every time I get a new student if they're eligible to bill Medicaid. Um, a note on Medicaid billing, this is something I did not know because we're used to working in the clinic at the university or at private practice where you bill Medicaid. It's on the same line as physical therapy, and so there's all sorts of things you have to consider. When schools bill Medicaid, there's a special Medicaid pot that is specifically for school billing. And so when I charge somebody for speech therapy, it's not their personal Medicaid. And so when I have a speech therapy session at school, they can't have one less session of outside speech therapy, for example. It doesn't take from their pot of overall money that they have. Um, I'm in my school budgeting class right now, and I still need to learn more about that. I wish I could tell you, um, but it's a strange thing that it's just a special pot that the government created to help fund schools since we have to provide the services. And so they said, well, how about if kids are eligible for Medicaid, then they can draw from this additional pot of services. And so then we have to submit paperwork to back up that we're providing services. So, anyways, Before Molly worked in Hamilton, and this is her third year there, she spent 3 years working for the Shoto School District as part of the Big Sky Cooperative. And so in Montana, there are enough rural spaces that the legislature has allowed for schools to create cooperatives to pool their money um, because not every school is big enough to pay for a full time speech therapist, but they still are required to provide speech therapy by federal legislation. So, what they are allowed to do is combine districts, even counties can combine and make co ops, and then they hire personnel from medically related fields, special education teachers, school psychs. Um, and so they go to different schools and they're paid by the co op. So the school hires the co op, is how it works. And then the co op provides personnel based on the number of students that need services. So in Shoto, Molly worked for the Big Sky Cooperative, and we have at least 3 recent graduates of and by recent, I mean in the last 6 years that work for the Big Sky Co-op. And so she worked in Shoto. This is a 5 county co-op. Um, so it's some in Glacier County, Toole County, Pend Oreille County. Let's see, Shoto is in Teton County. There must be one more I'm forgetting. I don't know if Hill is in that. Anyways, you report to a co-op director or a lead SLP who works under the co-op director, depending on the structure. So the director works with the school administrator to determine how many employees, and the director's directives, that's tricky, trumps the administration ideals. And so Molly said that sometimes there would be disagreement between the way the administrators at the school wanted to handle things and the way that her co-op director wanted to handle things. She said, number one, is they do not speech therapists don't get involved in that in any ways. Um, it's just between the school and the co-op director, and they ultimately just do what the co-op director tells them to do because that is who they are employed by. Um, so some co-ops have a union so that they can bargain for their rights and their pay scale, etc., and others don't. Um, so speech therapists who work for co-ops can work in one school or a number of schools. When Molly worked for Big Sky Cooperative, she served Shoto. She served, oh, what's the name of that town with the dinosaur museum? Starts with a B. Anyways, irrelevant, but she worked at a different little school. And she also served the Hutterite colony. And so she did work with non English language speakers. Um, but they had somebody who could help translate to determine if there are deficits in language. And so she did some of that work there. Um, and the duties, though, when you're in the school are very similar to someone hired directly by the school. And she said that, your level of feeling, how you feel if you belong at that school or if you're just in and out really depends on your personality, just like every single job that you get, no matter where you work. So, um, the pros and cons of working in a co-op: pay is generally better in a co-op. It more resembles that medically related professionals. There's initiatives to live and work outside more urban areas. So some of them are down in this section. The student loan repayment is good. And so I'll tell you about that in a second. There's smaller caseloads, of course, because you're traveling to all these little tiny schools. You spend more time sometimes on the road than you do serving kids. But I know that Molly was hopping in Shoto. There's better insurance, Molly said, between her co-op job and her job in Hamilton Public Schools. The insurance was way better, as was the health savings account. I was actually offered a job by the Big Sky Co-op, and they thought I would probably be working in the school in Conrad, but they knew that I would probably want to live in Shelby because that's where my daughter was going to high school at the time. So they said I could have a company car and I could just drive to Conrad every day in their vehicle, which was very nice considering most people would be like, oh, well, you're getting a job in Conrad, so you're going to live in Conrad. It wouldn't even be a consideration, but um, they do things like this to try and get people out in those rural areas. So Things to think about and questions to ask when you're interviewing. As far as student loan repayment goes, excuse me, Montana has a $17,500. I think that's a federal program actually. $17,500 after 5 years of public service, and then there's also the $10,000 or the full loan repayment for the 10 years of public service. Um, and people are actually getting their loans paid off. Um, that just started paying. That was a 2007 legislation, and so people just started getting their loans paid off in 2017. Um, in the co-op, in the Big Sky Co-op, in addition to this program where you could get your loans paid off, the co-op, I think that the state of Montana, there's a low SES loan forgiveness program. So if you work for a co-op, you automatically qualify for that. And for some school districts, you do if you have enough students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so all co-ops qualify for this. That's an additional, besides the 17,000 and the full payoff, that's additional one provided by the state of Montana. And then the co-op also will pay you. I think when they offered me a job, it was an additional $2,000 a year that they would pay on your student loans. And so um, working out in the boonies, if you are a person who can handle the rural area, can really pay off, literally. Even though your salary is going to be low, you're going to get student loans paid off. And so if you can handle a few years out there, or you might just fall in love with it, then it might be worth it for you. Because the co-op employs all of these types of people, you still have that team that you can collaborate with and discuss the what should I do questions. The cons would be that there's a lot of driving, although for me that's a great thing, maybe except in the winter when it's not great. And then you might not spend as much time in each building, and so it might be harder to develop those relationships with all the teachers and know the ins and outs of every space. Um, Getting to places on time, or if the roads are bad, are you going to be able to see all your clients? So those are some considerations. But like I said, those could be considerations in a district where you're working in multiple buildings as well. So anyways, so if you're employed by a private person or a private company, but you work there in person, and this is information about McKenna, um, all the salary and the terms are from the private company. So you're hired by the private company, but the place you work is in a school. So your schedule is determined by the caseload size and the school calendar, but your contract is negotiated by your um, boss in the private company, and then they tell you what you're going to get paid. This may or may not come with insurance. It may not come with retirement or benefits because you're not a school employee. You are a employee of this private practice. So McKenna, when she said when she's at work, it seems like she is an employee of the school, but she's not. So meetings are set by district policies. SLP might have to set meetings for clients they case manage. You cannot be in a union, and because the employer negotiates the salary with the school. So for McKenna, she works 4 days a week at the school, 2 8-hour days and 2 6-hour days. She has a paperwork block on days she's not at school. She has 68 school clients. They're all preschoolers, and then she has 11 outside private clients. And so she's also busy. She has a paraprofessional, however, and she told me that that paraprofessional for her sees half of her clients and also completes her Medicaid billing for her. So the para is hired by the school. Um, McKenna does all of the IDEA paperwork though, because I think in all states you have to be a licensed, certified. Well, you don't have to have your C's, so I don't want to give you that impression. But in order to do your Medicaid billing, you do have to be licensed by the state. Let's see. The SPED director sets the meetings for her if she's not the case manager, but if she's the case manager, she has to set her own meetings. She went to orientation for the school, so her private company would have paid her for that, even though she wasn't seeing clients. So she had to learn school safety and the procedures and lockdown drills and all those fun things we get to do in schools. Um, She absolutely feels like she's part of the staff. She feels comfortable reaching out to teachers and going to talk about ways to help kids functionally in their setting. It only took about 2 months to feel like part of the staff, but I think if you know McKenna, that's how it would be no matter what setting she was in. Okay, so then the last model that I want to talk to you about is my friend Margaret, who's employed by a private company. She's actually self-employed. She owns her own company here in Missoula. Uh, um, but as part of her practice, she works for another company which provides telepractice services, and the school that she works for is Havre Public Schools, way up on the High Line. So just like McKenna's situation, all her salary in terms of employment come from her private company, and so that's the person she contracts that contracts with the school, and who hired Margaret as an independent contractor. So again, the schedule is determined by caseload, size, school calendar. The private company negotiates with the school, and the school or the speech therapist interacts with school personnel through the help of an aide who has to help run the technology. And in Margaret's case, they also help her set meetings and talk to teachers about how kids are doing in class or any additional needs that they may have. So the meetings are set per their district policies, but the speech therapist might have to set meetings for clients they case manage. So when you're in this situation, you are not a member of the union, and all of your benefits will be through your private employer, not through the school at all. Um, so I already told you that the company that she works for is out of Billings. It's Rock Creek Teletherapy, which is owned by the president of MASHA this year, and her name's Kathleen Delap Cone. And she owns Rock Creek Teletherapy, and they provide services to schools in Montana. Um, so Margaret only has kids in grades 4 to 5, and she works 2 days a week, and she has 22 kids in her caseload. Um, so that's 11 kids a day. So that's a pretty busy caseload. For her Medicaid billing, she's not had to do that yet, excuse me, but she is responsible for all IDEA paperwork. So her paraprofessional, she gets along really well with her, and that lady helps her set up the technology for kids. Like I said, also contact the teachers, and then um, she also helps set meetings for kiddos when Margaret is the case manager. So that's really nice. And then there's just some information there on the bottom, a quote from Margaret about what she likes as far as doing telepractice. Um, I have some pros and cons here about working in schools, and so I asked everybody, I think not McKenna probably, but I think I know Margaret and Molly, I asked pros and cons. And so you can just read these slides. I don't need to read them for you. I will again say I love being part of the union. I love that I get to go to bat for special ed this year, and it's helping my leadership skills grow. So that's good. My last line there, no student, I get paid. That is different than private practice. Um, Private practice, if your client doesn't show up, you're missing part of your paycheck. But for me, it's a hallelujah. I finally get time to do paperwork or go talk to that teacher or run to the bathroom. So, um, things Margaret says about school there. I'll give you a minute to look at that. And here's Molly. Molly is verbose like I am. Well, you can probably pause that and read it if you want to. I guess I don't need to wait. Here are the things that are tricky, and I really wanted to know what was tricky about telepractice. And so Margaret has some thoughts, so you can pause that and read it if you'd like. And Molly, I mean, says some things that we all say about working in schools. So huge caseloads, never ending paperwork, sometimes of the year, just absolutely insane when you've got a bunch of evaluations and you're still dealing with your clients. And it seems like when it rains, it pours. This year, my November was just absolutely terrible. But then, December and January were light months, and I could just do my job and see my clients, and it was easy. So there's ups and downs. Lots of meetings And if you're in a school that has meetings during the school day, that means you're not seeing your clients when meetings are happening. And so that makes it tricky. Lots of people to collaborate with in schools, and that's what I love. I always think, I don't know how private practice clinicians make good decisions. I mean, of course they can about speech, but being able to collaborate with OT and the school psych and getting their IQ and their strengths and weaknesses, I think is absolutely invaluable in planning a really good set of goals for the client. So I really, really like that part about working in schools. Oh, slash, there's never any time to actually talk to those people. So that's a tricky thing. Like it's amazing what you can learn from them if you can find time to see them. So that's tricky. Sorry. Um, Tricky about working in schools. I mentioned a lot of the same things as Molly, and half the time you do not know where your students are. Not, I wouldn't say half, that's an exaggeration, of course, but a lot of times you just don't know where they are. This last slide, yes, we finally made it. I know that you are grateful and tired of listening to me, but if you're at work in Montana, I don't care what setting you're in, this is my plug. You should be an active member of ASHA for real. Um, You're not too busy. You might feel like you're too busy, but really it's $75. If all you can do is pay your membership fee, that is helpful. Why? Well, I'm so glad that you asked. So, for example, ASHA does not regulate caseload size. They don't even have they have a suggestion, which I think is about 45. Most speech therapists in Montana are far over that. MASHA has had surveys, and MASHA carries bills, and I feel pretty strongly that in the future we'll be working on regulating caseload size in Montana. And so, like I said, even if you don't have time to um, be on a committee or be on the board or whatever, um, your money goes to help those of us who are working to make your workplace better for you. Um, You need help with your caseload, and there's a shortage of SLPs. I'm sure you've heard about this. We're working with the university on a speech therapy assistant bill. Um, Everything didn't come together for this legislative session, but we're hoping to MASHA will find someone to carry that bill on our behalf and for the university to create the rules for assistance in speech language pathology. And so, again, even if you can't be on a committee, your membership helps with this, which could help in your workplace. Um, there's a large network of experienced speech therapists around the state. Um, and my question is, do you want to know them to help you solve your problems? The answer is yes, you do. They are members of MASHA. Leadership. Ah, didn't do that. You guys, I swear, we're actually done, but we can't finish now. Okay, we got to go to the end. Sorry, I'm a basket case. Sammy's used to it. Okay. Um, Leadership. You're more of an asset to your district or any job you have when you have good leadership skills. Building confidence. So, being members of committees, working with people who, yep, people who were my professors in grad school are now on committees with me. I am the chair of a committee that Dr. Glaspie sits on, for example. She's instrumental in that committee, and it's a weird juxtaposition, but it's a leadership. And so you become very quickly, when you join a committee, an equal with people who have maybe way more experience with you as speech therapists. But I am telling you, I am actually begging you, please come bring fresh blood. I'm one of the youngest members of MASHA that controls how things happen, and I am 45. And we need younger people to help us understand how to make our membership grow and what's important. And we can't help you if you're not members and we're not hearing your voice. And so join, be active, get on a committee. You don't have to run the committee. You can just help on a committee, but you're learning things that way. Um, and then finally, it just matters. Somebody has to move things forward in your state, and why? why not you? If you were doing it in Schwa or if you're a part of NISLA, it's just the next step. And you can be as active as you want, but it's just a really important thing. So, anyways, I really appreciate you listening to all or parts of my extremely long PowerPoint. Hopefully, it was informative, and I will see you at your graduation because I'm representing Masha. All right, thank you.